I'm back. Okay, I never really went anywhere. This is once again Chapter 7, Holes Anatomy, Physiology. We are now talking skeletal systems, specifically bones, parts of bones, and tissues of bones, skeletal tissues. So first let's classify them. Axial skeleton is your skull, vertebral column, and rib cage. Just meant to protect and support all the different body parts. And then you have your appendicular skeleton, bones of the upper and lower limbs, also the girdles, and this basically allows you to move and interact with your environment. Different types of bones. Long bones, they're called that because they happen to be long. Short bones are really short. Flat bones happen to be flat, and irregular bones are just weird. We can't classify them as one of the other three, so that's like the miscellaneous. We just fit them over there. They're irregular. So now long bones are longer than they are wide. They absorb stress from the body, so we can see long bones here, and in the arms and so on. Arms, forearms, blah, 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 legs, thighs, feet. Okay, those are long bones. Short bones, equal in width and length. They're basically like a cube shape. You can find them in the carpals, metacarpals, so you look in the wrist and the ankle, you see those cube-like bones. Those are short bones. Flat bones, then we have like in the sternum and in the skull. They're flattened, often a bit curved. They're found in the cranium, the ribs, also the scapula and the sternum. These are flat bones. And then you have irregular bones, which is everything else, like the hip, the vertebrae, and the weird-shaped bones of the face. Now, why do we have bones all together? Well, number one, support. Helps provide support and structure for the rest of our body. Protection, helps to protect us, of course. Enables us to move, so this is why our skeletal muscles are attached to our bones, so we can move with them. Mineral storage, calcium, of course, you probably know in your bones. Your bones is a storage site for that calcium and other minerals. And then blood cell formation. So in the bone marrow, inside the bones, or some of the bones, we have blood cell formation. Bones and cartilages of the human body. So just to give you some idea, in blue all over here, we see hyaline cartilage, and then fibrocartilage found here and also in the spine. And then elastic cartilage is green. All different kinds of cartilage. Here you see also the hyaline cartilage here in the trachea, right? These bumps on the front of your trachea that you see there. Different types of cartilage. We'll talk later about why cartilage is important and so on in the process of bone formation. I think that's in part 2. So gross anatomy, different bone textures. We have compact bone. Compact bone is very hard and dense. It's typically the outside of the bone. We can show you in class kind of what that looks like a little bit better, but compact bone. Spongy bone looks like Swiss cheese. It's got all holes all throughout it. And we call those little holes, that honeycomb-like effect, trabeculae, where these different layers with holes all around them are connected together. And throughout all these holes, we have yellow bone marrow. It's not the typical one that you thought of or learned about as in red bone marrow, where blood cell formation occurs. But it's yellow bone marrow, which is just fatty tissue. Yellow is always fat, and it's used for energy storage. All right, specifically to long bone, getting into structure and now all the details where it gets ultra complex here. So the long bone itself has a diaphysis and an epiphysis. So the diaphysis is the middle of the bone. Here we have a long bone. It looks totally like a long bone, can't you tell? And in the middle you have the tubular shaft. It's the long part of the long bone. This is the diaphysis, okay? And it's surrounded or wrapped around here, this is compact bone. Can you tell this is very hard? And inside the middle of this is a medullary cavity. So, of course, here you have the medullary cavity on the inside where you have bone marrow. It looks like batteries, but really it's bone marrow. Now if I can put this together before I break it. So that's where you have yellow bone marrow. This is in the diaphysis of the long bone. The epiphysis is the ends, okay? The exterior is still compact bone, but the interior is spongy bone. And the surfaces of these end caps, if you like, are covered with cartilage. Typically or usually hyaline cartilage, where they make up part of the joint. And then where the diaphysis meets the epiphysis right here, do I have something that can be an epiphysis? Not really. Where the epiphysis meets the diaphysis, we have an epiphyseal line. And this epiphyseal line is still cartilage. It hasn't ossified yet until you reach a certain age. And this is the line at which new growth occurs to elongate the bone. So as you get taller, you grow taller at this epiphyseal line. We'll show you what it looks like here. Here you can see the epiphyseal line. In the middle you can see spongy bone. On the outside of the whole thing you see compact bone. Here's the medullary cavity. This epiphyseal line, you'll see, we'll talk later about an epiphyseal break. You can break it there, which you don't want to, but more on that later. Here we have the diaphysis and the epiphysis up there. Here you can see the spongy bone and all the trabeculae that are laid down together. And in the middle you have this yellow bone marrow inside the medullary cavity. And the medullary cavity is lined in this protective layer called endosteum, which is connective tissue. And then it's very similar to the structure of the periosteum, which wraps around the bone structure here to provide strength and support as well. So periosteum on the outside, endosteum, endo again means inside, inside the medullary cavity, or lining that. I hit everything on this? I think so. Okay. So the periosteum, double-layered protective membrane, its outer fibrous layer, its dense connective tissue, and then inside you have the bone itself, osteoblasts and osteoclasts, where we'll talk about that in just a second. That's the inside layer as new bone is forming. And it's super rich in blood supply and nerve fibers and so on. The endosteum, as we talked about, is the membrane covering the internal surface of the bone of the medullary cavity, and it's there for protection as well, but it's a little more delicate. All right, here we have short, irregular, and flat bones structurally. Thin plates of periosteum, so it's still covering the compact bone on the outside, and inside you have spongy bone. There is no diaphysis and epiphysis, of course, and there is bone marrow within all the trabeculae, like we saw previously at the ends or at the epiphysis, and even in the diaphysis. So here you see what it looks like. Here's the spongy bone in the middle and compact bone on the sides, and you would have some yellow marrow throughout this trabeculae there of the spongy bone. Now, you've all heard of red bone marrow, as you might imagine, hematopoietic tissue. Red bone marrow, by the way, is super yummy. I can remember going to a restaurant and having mac and cheese, and next to the mac and cheese there was a little cut of a long bone, and they cook the bone marrow, and you scoop out the bone marrow with a spoon and mix it in with your mac and cheese, and it's super healthy and super yummy. If you ever have the opportunity to try bone marrow, I highly suggest it. Super good. I know it sounds weird, but it's good. Okay, so in infants, the red bone marrow is found in the medullary cavity of the spongy bone, and this is basically all medullary cavity and spongy bone of all the bones in infants, because there's super high, super fast production of bone marrow, of blood cells. This hematopoietic, by the way, means it's stem cells of the blood. And it's the same type of tissue, by the way, that's found in the umbilical cord, which is where they would cut out and save for a baby should there be any kind of blood-based disease. They can use it for treatment. It's a common business now. But in adults, the red bone marrow is few and far between, only in the spongy bone of flat bones, and then in the head of the femur and the humerus. So if you're going to give a bone marrow transplant to somebody, let's say they had leukemia and they needed a bone marrow transplant, they would typically extract that bone marrow from the head of the femur. They have to go through the exterior of the bone and into the medullary cavity, into the spongy bone region, and pull out some of the red marrow. So far less common in adults, but still there. Now we get into the microscopic structure, and this will be the last part for this first section. The osteon is one bone unit. Sometimes people call it the Haversian system because it involves all these different canals and vessels and so on, but osteon is what we typically like to call it. And the osteon includes the lamella, which we'll show you. This is the weight-bearing column-like tubes, which are mostly collagen. Bone is a lot of collagen and connective tissue, maybe something like 40% collagen and connective tissue, and that includes cartilage, by the way, and then maybe 60% bone, actual bone. Then we have the Haversian canal, which is sometimes called the central canal. It's the big, in the osteon, it's the central, the main singular canal. We'll show you in the next picture. And then we have Volkmann's canal, which lie sideways to the big central canal, and they carry blood and nerve supplies and so on. Then we have osteocytes. These are bone cells. Osteo means bone. Cyte is cell. Lacunae are these small, teeny tiny small pockets or holes in the bone where the osteocytes are. They live or survive, if you like. And then the canaliculi, which is one of the better words in all of the class and very fun to say. I highly recommend it. Canaliculi. They connect all the lacunae together as little traverses or passageways, and then also to the central canal. So let's take a look at what we're talking about here. First of all, here's one osteon. Okay, this circular region. And if we focus on this osteon, here you see the Haversian canal, or central canal, okay? And to a right angle of that, you have the Volkmann's canal, carrying a blood vessel here, of course. Here you have spongy bone, here's compact bone, of course. You see the periosteum on the outside. And then if we look in here, you can see the lacunae, okay, where the osteocyte is. The osteocyte is that yellow thing. It's a bone cell. And then the passageways between these, here you have the lamella, these regions, and connection of these lamella, or the osteocytes, one to the other, is through these canaliculi, which is like, sounds like Italian for canal, of course, so it should be pretty easy to remember. All right, that's one osteon. We mentioned osteocytes, bone cells. There's also osteoblasts. We heard of fibroblasts, which form fibrous tissue, connective tissue, including things like scar tissue. Osteoblasts are bone-forming cells, super important. And then we have osteoclasts, which cut bone. I like to say cut bone because class sounds like cut, or the same letter C, which are cells that resorb. It's not reabsorb. Strange, I know. Resorb the bone matrix. So when you need to reabsorb some of the calcium, for example, you don't have enough in your blood supply, you'll take it off of your bone, and osteoclasts free this up. The osteoid is a large part of the bone. It's the unmineralized bone matrix, and it's a large portion of collagen and connective tissues. The osteoid is like the immature bone. When bone gets ossified, you'll take the osteoid, the cartilage, collagen-y type bone, the softer bone, and you calcify it to make it into hard bone. Whether you are growing or you are repairing a break or something like that. And we'll stop here for part 2.